of exercises, that's all.
That DPPOA rests or that our meetings were dull and interesting. Okay. First of all, I would like to show hands approving the minutes from the June meeting. I don't think you did, but we can vote anyway. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I can't hear it now.
We don't have a quorum, but we can vote on the minutes because we planned ahead.
It's shut.
You gotta speak up, Amy.
Stand up.
In any event, the vote here will count for the minutes, and I'd like to show hands approving June 29th minutes.
Question.
Any opposed?
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm looking through the minutes of the last meeting, and it hasn't jumped out to me where at the last meeting, the call was presented in order to make this meeting also be under the Maryland state law.
It was
The last meeting was because the meeting 2 meetings ago did that, but I don't see in the minutes from the last meeting where that was done again for this meeting.
It was
Have I
a
missed
September
it?
meeting. I don't have the September minutes here because there's no true minutes.
Ah,
It was
okay,
just
so
a
this
vote.
is just the June that we're voting on, not the September. Okay, because I thought you had said minutes from the previous meeting, but we're voting on minutes from 2 meetings ago.
Right,
Okay,
the previous two, that's what I meant, 2 previous.
thank you.
All right, and there are no opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so the minutes stand as approved. Now, I need a copy, one copy of my handout.
And this is a full copy. This is a full
This is what
copy. You want that handed out right now?
yes, please.
And have to share a little bit?
What I'm doing now, I just want to remind you, first of all, that, can you hear me now? The major focus of this meeting, as announced on the website, is the spending and fee projections and changes that were announced and described in your winter newsletter. And that will be built into my remarks as president, and later on during the committee reports by Karen Heal, who chairs the planning committee. So there will be a couple of presentations. And then I don't want to exclude comments or questions as we go through these presentations, but we are planning to get through everything as quickly as possible so we can devote public comment period to discussion of these imminent fee changes. So let me start out before I get into the fee changes by a remark of something that all of you are aware of, which is our sign at campus was knocked down. It was knocked down by a driver who was under the influence of something. And this was taken to court. We had insurance that covered it. And in addition, the driver's insurance, liability insurance, was also intact. And the upshot is that we have just this week received a check from our insurance company to cover the whole amount to fix the sign, replace any parts that need to be replaced. So that's coming soon. It took quite a while to get all of this together. There was no standard cost for replacing a sign of this complexity. It has a light, it has heavy-duty electrical outlet, etc. And there was damage to landscaping. So we apologize it took so long, but it will all be fixed up very soon. So now I'd like to get into my remarks. I'm going to do a little bit of review and background, and most of the future changes will be described by Harry as part of the planning committee report. If you look at page 1 of the handout, we have 4 sources of funds. Hi, Larry. Aubrey. You have a seat for him. Okay. 3 of those sources, covenant fees, STD, and state highway user revenue, must be spent on roads or roads-related expenses. We have no choice in that they're all constrained at this point. The dues, which are based on our voluntary dues of $60 per lot, have unrestricted applications, so we can apply them to anything that we really need to apply them to, but they only go so far. Now, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background, that you have the figures of the amounts that are set for each set of fees, and short funds have shrunk to somewhere between $7,000 and $9,000. It varies, but it's small. The STD figure of $150 per lot was smaller than we requested for the county. We had requested $165 or $160 per lot, and that was for bare bones budget. And that was all taken to the community in advance. In addition to that, the STD funds were further restricted. They had a broader scope that we could apply them to, but now they're restricted to roads and roads-related expenditures only. And the bottom line on this page is our voluntary dues are the only income we have to support community activities and infrastructure. And that includes beach, boat ramp, office and manager, water access easements, common lot maintenance, and so on. In order to keep afloat at all, in this year's budget, we had to put off or diminish the level of support for brush clearing of common areas for fire prevention, maintenance of common areas, including all of our easements, the office, signs, and as the newsletter notes, if we hadn't had the insurance coverage for the Beretta Boulevard sign, we would not have been able to fully replace it. Proactive tree trimming and bush hogging and rights of way, which means that when there is a storm, there is less coming down. We're not doing as much proactive trimming. Dredgeability for sediment control and other community services and events. Now, the STD carryover funds are being spent now. We had built up a piggy bank with our STD, so we had savings, and we're spending down, in addition to the $150 per lot that comes in, we have some carryover money, and we have to spend that down, it's not gone, in order to maintain our roads as needed. But I will tell you that right now, our carryover funds may be insufficient to fully clear the roads if we have another snow event in the year. We have budgeted for snow removal, but not as much as we just don't have any contingency area. So now on to your next handout, deficit budgeting for DPPOA. Last June, you all, the community, we voted to approve the 2014 fiscal year DPPOA expense budget of $49,000. That's our unrestricted funding that we're using for everything other than roads. However, our voluntary dues have been bringing in only about $37,000. So how did the board even recommend a deficit budget to the community? We had a small nest egg of savings of $32,000, and this deficit budget for this year we're in will spend down $12,000 of that budget. That savings. Now, when you have $32,000 in savings and you're spending now at the rate of $12,000 a year in order to keep the bare minimum afloat, that only goes for 2.5 years. We're halfway into that. We have 2 more years to go, and then we simply aren't major problems to keep ourselves afloat. So, as a result, because we're actually spending down our STD carryover, and we're spending down our savings for DPPOA from former dues collection, in order to maintain property values and quality of life at Drum Point, the board realizes that something has to change. So first of all, we need a reliable and measurable amount of income for DPPOA. And so in fiscal year 2015, which is the next billing cycle, which starts in January or February, a couple of months from now, our voluntary dues of $60 per lot will be replaced by a 55/20 assessment. That will be obligatory, not voluntary. $55 will be for a developed lot with a house and $20 for an undeveloped lot. Gary will say more about equitability later on, but this is proportional to the amount of use that you're giving the community. When you have a house, you're calling on the community for more services. After fiscal year 2015, the covenant fees for road expenses will increase according to the Consumer Price Index. So if you multiply $10 by the Consumer Price Index increment, $10 in 1947, it comes to a bit over $100 per lot in current money. The burden will be shared by everyone. Everyone will have a vote. There will not be a differentiation between membership and non-membership as long as you're paid up by your obligatory expenses. And the major advantage here is financial control will shift towards the community. So if you go back to the very first page, I'm almost there, you can see that the covenant fees jumping to over $100 from 10 will mean there's a much greater proportion of funds that we're going to realize on our own. Our goal is to decrease the STD amount. We don't need so much money for roads-related expenses, and therefore proportionally we're going to shift more control of our finances here. and Gary went to more detail into the projections. Maria?
Well, I have a question. I've lived here for quite a while now, and it's never been legally allowed.
Someone's going to have to repeat what you're saying.
It has never been legally allowed to do what you're proposing. I would like to know where your legal documentation is coming from to allow for you to legally change the covenants, number one, and legally assess a fee that has never been a required fee since as long as I've lived in Drum Point.
I'd like the group here today to hear the full presentation, and Gary and his planning committee work with us, has explored this with our attorney, and I would like him to come back to that, to your question during his presentation. Any other comments or questions before we move on?
But I do have just one more comment. I just don't understand why you would continue to work in a deficit budget if you know that that's been an issue.
If someone,
Once again, I do not understand why you continue, because every year you make a new budget, why you would continue to choose to work with the deficit budgeting process.
we had to recommend a deficit budgeting process for community maintenance and administration in order to keep going. We did have the savings. It was meant to be short-term, and we knew we were going to have to do something, and we've been working on it all year. And the community, when we finally did vote for it.
And how many people were present on June?
Public comment.
Yes?
Basically, the minimum amount exceed what we take in. If we cut more services, we're jeopardizing elements within the community. So it's not that we want to spend more than we take in. That's not good business. But we're not taking in enough to meet current needs. Needs being very restricted since the STDs last year.
I just want to mention one other thing. It's interesting that you bring this up. I do want to have this during this kind of discussion later on when you have the entire context. I want to call on Gary, but I want to point out that we have brought in a lot of volunteer services to keep afloat. Too many to mention now, but you certainly can't cut the grass on 15 miles of right of way to keep the road shoulder clear with volunteer services. Gary?
I think it's important we have a hard stop in this meeting, and I think if we just stick to the agenda, and then at the end there'll be an extensive question and answer period. If you could hold your questions till we get through all the presentations, it would be very helpful.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Now, I'm aiming at adjourning the meeting at 11:30 or earlier because we've got to be out of here absolutely by noon and we have to clear everything up, and it takes a while. So I'm ready to go on to the committee reports. Roads Committee.
Okay, thank you very much. During the last period, since the last public meeting, we have done another phase of rejuvenation for the roads. This contract was competitively bid and selected, and the contract has a provision in it that we can continue under the proposed pricing into next year as needed. The restoration cost was $50,000, and we did a fairly substantial portion of the roads, those that needed it the most. During that period, we also did a lot of repaving. Many of you probably saw or felt it. The trucks were around here a lot. Sometimes getting by was not easy. That work has basically been done, but the road edges, and I know we have had some complaints that the road edges have not been finished. If there is a drop off from the road, the replaced road, and it's in a grassy area, it will be backfilled with topsoil and seed. If it is in an area where there's a heavy runoff water from rain, it will be filled with CR6, which is a material that compacts. They come with a tamper and it compacts down. works very good along road edges. So those things have been done, and that effort was $80,000. It has not been paid for yet because the road edge work has not been completed. The vendor has to perform that before he gets paid. Road edge. It is my intent in the coming board meetings that I will actively pursue money being available for right-of-way clearing. Right-of-way clearing was taken out of the budget, and if any of you live along some of the roads that have not been right-of-way cleared, we're in bad shape. We're in very bad shape. I'm not proud of this community to look at driving through here and seeing the road edges as they are. We're going to work on that. That'll be the next road project. Any questions? Okay, thank you. That's my report.
Okay, Finance Committee?
Here we have two exhibits for you there. I won't go through them in detail. One is the balance sheet, which basically shows the balance of all of our bank accounts and assets at this point in time. The second one is a consolidated spreadsheet showing the expenditures of the community for the past fiscal year. There are no unusual expenses listed here, except for the recent road paving projects which we undertook as a decision mid-year here. So, and that number is not on here yet because we actually haven't received the bill from the paving company as yet. It will be received here by the next quarter when we show you the report again. So, if anyone has any questions about these expenditures and things, please contact us at the office or call me. I'll be glad to explain anything to anybody anytime.
We ask now.
I think you're giving to answer one question.
Okay, well, I have a question. Where's the 80,000 coming out of? What line item?
What 8,000?
That you said it cost you?
80,000 for the
road
repaving.
repaving.
It's coming out of the STD funding for roads.
Can you give me the number that I'm supposed to be looking at under the budget?
I think,
Well, it'll be under major road paving there, the 7955 most likely.
I think this is, we're now at the point of detail that you should come to that.
Okay, so he explained, okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to go on for the next report? Okay. I chair the environmental committee in my spare time. And we have done one thing recently, and you'll hear about it in the future, and that is SMECO will now give free assessments for energy efficiency in your home. The office being equivalent to a home qualified, so we didn't have to pay for it, and SMECO came out and assessed it, and the environmental committee is following through with some recommendations. We have a little bit more we have to look into, but as we probably could have predicted, the insulation in the attic should be improved after many years, and with current energy prices, you do need more insulation. We need to look into caulking, which decreases unnecessary airflow that you would have to heat or cool otherwise, and the water heater is very inefficient. So the environmental committee is looking into available rebates and options, or it will act on some of these recommendations, or at least hear them in the future. And you can contact SMECO yourself. They have something on your website so you can get a free consultation. And that's my report. There are no...
Okay. What question about that? Maybe it's in the details of there, but I know that I've received stuff from SMECO and they talk about an audit and it's like $100. So is that something different?
Ours was free. If you ask for the blower test where they actually test how much air is going through instead of visually assessing where you have leakage, that is $100, but the
Okay.
rest of it is free, and they will, what did they
All right,
replace
thanks for
first,
clarifying.
Rita?
They replaced
No,
all
it's
the,
fine, just-
they
Yeah,
replaced all
thanks
the
for
bulbs.
clarifying.
Okay, go ahead.
All the bulbs, any bulbs that were not the new swirly looking, I don't know what they're called.
Compact
Yes,
fluorescent.
exactly. They replaced all of those
And the
for
power
us,
strips.
and they left us with a couple of power strips that are backup and more energy efficient.
They replaced them free,
Yes.
so we should put the old ones in our house and call them.
There you go.
And they would probably replace them.
May I make a comment with regard to
Yes.
that? I bought a house 19 years ago in Drum Point, and it had a water heater in it. I still had the 19-year-old water heater, and I knew it was inefficient, and every time I went on vacation, I worried. I had a kid next door come by, make sure that it didn't start to leak and so on. I got a circular from Bray and Scott's that they were offering for sale, a special sale, a General Electric high-efficiency water heater. It was $899. List price $1,299. Smeco offered a $350 rebate against that purchase price, and the federal government is also offering a rebate of close to $300 on your tax return. I had it installed at a cost of $700, so the outlay was like $1,500. And I have noticed an average reduction in my electric bill of $50 a month.
Wow.
$50 a month, so those high efficiency water heaters are a great investment. And Smeco will support it.
Use more electricity.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Planning committee?
Planning committee, that's me. I'm going to talk loud so you all can hear me, I hope you can. The planning committee has been meeting a lot since last July. It was at the direction of the board. The board has been looking into, for a year, over a year, into finding a way to fund Drum Point in a fair and equitable way, and that would provide revenue that is useful. Today, we have, as you saw in the handout from Amy, covenant fees, STD money, and dues, and shore funds. Well, shore funds are almost virtually, they have no play, really. And it's not expressed here in a monthly thing. But STD is the big nut, and that's about almost 2/3 of the money we get is from the STD. And it has all kinds of hooks in it. The county has decided that they need to put restrictions on it on how we spend it. They monitor every dime. And to answer Maria's question, where's the money coming from? Well, it's coming from there. They approve every expenditure. It is not necessarily followed directly by the budget that was filed with the STD submission. So the county is involved in every dime we spend in STD, and it has to be approved. As a result, there are lots of things that Drum Point can't use that money for, and that's 2/3 of our revenue. So with that in mind, the planning committee started meeting in July. I can't even tell you how many meetings we've had, about 2 a month almost since. And we came up with a lot of recommendations that we took forward to the board. Some of have been voted on and approved, others have not, some were rejected. But basically, that coupled with a special meeting we had, the board had with the Drum Point attorney, we determined that the legal landscape here in Maryland has changed to the point that we can, in fact, go forward with an adjusted covenant fee. So it was $10 in 1947. When you do an adjustment for a consumer price index, it's like 105 today. I'm going to throw an overhead up here in a second, and we kind of projected what it might be in future years because CPI keeps going up. So we said, okay, well that's fine, but you know that's just more road money. almost like STD. Well, you come to find out that, again, the legal landscape in Maryland has changed to allow us to use some of that money to pay for other things other than road. So, okay, that's fine. Still, it's not getting us there. And we started looking at dues. Okay, well, maybe we should increase dues. Well, every time we increase dues, we get fewer people contributing. Yeah, it goes up, but it's not directly proportionate. So in conjunction with consulting with our attorney, he also said you can have a mandatory assessment. Now that's the last time you're going to hear me say mandatory, but it would be. So there'll be an assessment instead of a due. Instead of paying dues, there would be an assessment. Everybody would be required to pay it. It would be an equitable assessment based on usage. If you have a developed lot, i.e. a house, you would pay $55 a year. That's less than the 60. If you have an undeveloped lot, the usage would be less, so the dues are down to 20. We projected what that income would be, and that's how we came up with the number, by the way. We projected that a certain percentage of people would pay it, and took that revenue and plugged it into the DPPOA expenses. That coupled with some contributions from Covenant and, well, basically those two, would cover all the non-road related expenses at Drum Point. By the way, let me remind you, we did a study a couple of years ago. 65% of everything that happens at Drum Point is road related. Everything. 65% of the committee's work and the board's work and Rita's work in the office, everything. 65% of everything is really directly road related. There are administrative costs to maintaining the roads. So, with that in mind, the planning committee came up with an idea, and I'm going to put it up here, but I'll point out to you that this has not been voted on by the board. It's not even out from the planning committee in this form, but this is the idea. What you would end up with is covenant fees in this year and next year would remain next year would remain at 10. You see where I'm pointing right here, right? And then it would go up to the consumer price adjusted of 111, and that's a projection. We don't know for sure that it'll be that. The CPI might go down next year. I don't know. And then continue to go up. It hasn't gone up in 60 years. I mean, down to 60 years, so I doubt it. The STD would stay the same for the life of the STD, which ends in 2017, and then it would be adjusted downward. And the fees are replaced with the mandatory assessment. I said it again, the assessment. And these numbers reflect the highest number anybody would have to pay. If you have an undeveloped lot, of course, it would be less. And it also doesn't reflect any adjustments that we might make, or not we, the board might make. The adjustments can't be made to the covenant fee because that's locked to the consumer price index. But you can adjust the STD. It's not likely that I can't imagine that it would go up because what we're doing, the whole idea here, is to move the funding from the STD into covenant. And between the covenant and the assessment, you would have probably 80% at the end of the day. About 80% of the funding would be directly under control of the membership. And when I say that, every year, I don't know if you guys have been here for a while, most of you, every June, there's a budget comes in front of you and you have to vote on it, and that's what we're going to operate off of. Well, right now, about 2/3 of the funding you really don't get to vote on. You get input to the county. you get to talk to the county about it. So does the board. The county ends up doing whatever it wants. This way, you have direct input by sitting here in this seat and voting on the budget and giving input to the budget before it's brought forward. Right now, you don't have that. 2/3 of it is under control of the STD and the county. So, the idea is to move the control from STD to drum point revenue and make it equitable and fair for everybody. One of the side effects is everybody has to pay their fair share because they're all required fees. It's not, the money isn't dependent on people who are voluntarily paying fees. But let's play with this a little bit. Let's say that the STD, when we get down to 2018, we find that we don't need a contribution of $285. That it really, oh, by the way, I should have told you this first of all. The 220 and 215 isn't even close to what we need on a per lot per year contribution. It needs to be, right now today, probably around 260. And you can play with the numbers and have them say what you want, but it should be probably around 260. We're underfunded, hence the deficit fund. Yeah, it goes up in 2016, but the STD hasn't expired yet. And although it is possible to go back and ask for a reduction in the STD, I think it would be foolhardy to do that right away, maybe the next year, but not in 2016. So it's an inflated number. The money doesn't go anywhere except in the bank and will be adjusted later on. The board has agreed and does already review the budget every year. So every year, the finance committee, the planning committee, and the board goes through a comprehensive rebudgeting process, and they look at every line item and decide, is it an appropriate expense, and is the amount in there appropriate, and adjustments are made. So when you come up to the next year, if the board says, well, we don't have enough money to pay our bills, this 55 might be adjusted, or more likely, the STD is overfunded because we have more money for capital than we need because we moved the funding from STD to Covenant. We would probably say let's reduce the STD. So if you were to reduce the STD to, let's say, $50, that takes it down to 223. That may be too much of a cut. So maybe it's the real answer is like $75, and you run about 248. There's a spike while the STD is still in play. The money gets used up. It doesn't go anywhere. It's there for our use, and it evens out in the long run. One of the reasons we're kind of forced to do that, or the thought is, we don't know exactly what the collection rate's going to be. We're changing the fee structure. We don't know what the collection rate's going to be. It will be mandatory, so if it's not paid, a lot of owners are liable to end up in court about it. That doesn't mean that drum point will get the money though, because when you go to court for non-payment for covenant fees or HOA fees, it ends up usually as a lien against the property. Who knows when you get the money? So we're not real sure what the collection rate's going to be, and you need to let that settle out for a couple of years to understand if there'll be enough money or not.
What's
Yes.
your collection rate right now?
I'm sorry?
What is your collection rate right now?
Well, if you look at dues, it's only
48%.
48% people pay. The collection rate for STD, which is a tax,
Yeah.
it's really a fee, it's called a tax, is 85%.
That's how much we actually, that's how much the county actually manages to collect in a current year.
So you have to assume that a mandatory or a covenant fee and an assessment probably wouldn't be any better collection rate than that.
Worse.
Probably. It's
gonna be
safe to
worse.
assume it's going to be worse. Right, all the more reason for us to not give up the money in the STD until the end of the STD, which is in 2017.
Gary,
Amy?
while you're playing with numbers, are you going to talk about the possibilities of adjusting the STD before the end of the 5 years?
Yeah, I alluded to that, and here's the thing about adjusting the STD. Let's say we adjusted in 2017 to 112 down. We said, hey, county, and I guarantee you, if we go to the county and say, oh, we don't need the 150, when they send out the bill, they'll reduce it to whatever we tell them it could be. It's a one-way street, though.
Whatever they decide.
Well, yeah, Paul's right. We could go in and ask for a reduction to 112, which is what I plugged in there. That doesn't mean they'll actually do that. They may say, well, no, you know, we're not going to adjust it. Or they might say, well, yeah, it probably should be 100. We don't. I hate to use the word, but it's like a crapshoot when you go to the county with the STD. But it's also a one-way street. Going down is a lot easier than going up. And so once you reduce it, and we find that it gets reduced to a number that we can't live with in 2018, when we have to go back for a new one, it will be very, very difficult to be able to adjust that number. That's a good question. Thank you, Amy. And I am open to questions now. Sir?
Yeah, I noticed you're making the assumption you can start the new assessment for the next fiscal year. You're not doing that with the covenant fee. Is there a reason for that? Or?
Yeah, there was. We thought, because of these two numbers over here, well,
Yeah.
we thought it's not fair to come to the community and say, look, you got to pay this number starting in 2015. And that's the planning committee's thought.
Okay.
Again, none of this has been approved by the board yet. This is only out of the planning committee. Dan?
Do you have any information as far as comparable fees for other private communities in the state and how these compare with those?
Well, it's hard to call apples to apples here, but the closest obviously is CRE. I think Max might be able to give us an idea on what our CRE is. I don't know off the top of my head, maybe John.
I don't know what each and all of the fees are, but their STD is $250 to start off with.
Yeah, I think they're
Total
mandatory.
fees are over $600.
Yeah. I have friends that live in CRE, and they tell me it's over $600 a year.
White Sands, which has no amenities except an office building, clubhouse, whatever you want to call it, pay $180 a year, and they don't take care of 1 inch of roads.
Because the county does.
Turn it over to the county, that's correct.
Yes, but they also paid anywhere from $75 to $200 a year in additional road district taxes, Maria.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, questions? Maria?
Can you inform us a little bit more about what this legal landscape is? Because you kept saying there's a new legal landscape that allows for you because this was not allowed prior.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys had any legal background, but if the term stare decisis means anything, it's what has come before. Judges take into consideration in court cases what has come before. And things change as decisions are made by judges that are different. In the past, judges and the courts have seen covenants and HOA documents as in a very conservative way. In other words, if it doesn't expressly permit something, you can't do it. In the last 5 years, 6 years, there have been numerous court cases in Maryland that say, yes, the intent was to allow this. And that is where that's coming from. There have been several cases where the covenants did not expressly allow something, but the courts decreed that it could be done because obviously the intent was.
And this, your lawyer has provided you with.
We do have a legal opinion from the attorney that cites.
Your attorney is in?
Mr. Shield in Montgomery County. So, other questions? Sir?
If my memory's correct, the STD4 that we're currently under does not pay for 100% of all our desired road needs. Is that still the status?
I'm not sure 100%. It's not 100%, but it's real close. I
Okay.
mean, we do pay for out of Shore, which is $7,000 to $9,000, and we do pay for some out of our covenant fees.
If it's close to that, the part that I don't understand in all of this discussion is why we would even contemplate reducing it now or in the future. That's got nothing to do with your discussion about adjusting covenant fees and other things. But I can't see cutting our nose off to spite our face or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
The administration burden is something we've automated almost to the point of it's routine.
Okay, and let me address that, and then I'll come over here to
I need to add something because your question could have been answered different ways. It's true that other funding streams, such as the covenants, also address roads. But it's also true that we're still having to draw down from our old carryover funds from previous STDs, even to keep up with our roads needs now. So our current $150 plus those other contributions doesn't cover our roads and operations needs, and that's only roads related.
That was my understanding when we went through all the turmoil of getting it. So I don't understand why you talk about potentially reducing it, independent of what you do with the covenants to make the overall budget.
I think we all agree.
Great. John?
I agree with you. I think everyone in here will agree with you. But remember one thing, one of the points Gary made right at the beginning, and I've said it on every one of these planning committee meetings, is that community will have more input into the budget process. In other words, we're not going to go off and do it our own thing. The community is going to be involved in a lot of it. And we can put it together and show you exactly what's going on in a better way than we can right now. We don't have to ask for any extra in the STD to be told by the county is no, it's only roads and roads related.
Right, that's why I understand what your discussion about the covenants.
You will have a say in this.
And maybe I don't understand your question. So what your question is, the way I understand it is, we shouldn't reduce the STD or increase the covenants.
No, we should increase the covenants,
well, then I
plus
have
keep the STD,
okay.
and use the
Well, here's the
CPI to...
Why would you spend give the drug point more money than is required to run it?
You don't know that, though.
I don't yet. And I'm saying it'll have to be evaluated every year.
And if nothing else, the road paving expenses
They
continue
go up.
to go up.
Well, actually, it went down this year, go figure.
That will last.
I'm sorry, I agree with you, won't go there. Paul?
2014 is the current budget.
Yeah.
2015 will be the basis of the proposed budget for that year. 16, 17, and 18 are merely
Well, we haven't yet
illustrations.
proposed the 2015 yet.
Right, but it will be shortly. But 16, 17, and 18 are only illustrations, and what we're seeing here today is some of the problems with using illustrations that are not properly worked out.
Correct. Yeah, and I don't think, speaking for myself, I don't want to give Drum Point $300–400 a year if they only need 2 captains. But it would come together in years out. It's going to take a few years.
I guess my question is, Mary was talking about it, are the covenant fees adjustable to make the balance where the budget is? Or are you stuck because of your legal restraints to make it CPI only?
It needs to be tied to something, and the CPI is the only thing that makes sense to tie it to. Maria?
Well, you keep saying that you'll have more input. My question is, how many people were here June, whatever it was, June 29th, to actually vote on the budget? That's my concern. Is
Well,
that
Maria, I would argue that people who cared were here.
I'm just saying that if you're really wanting community involvement in the budgeting process, you need to make certain you're doing a mail ballot and not having it at a community hearing that only requires those people in attendance, seeing that that's the way you interpret that law. Or even though
Gary
not all
and
lawyers
Maria,
interpret it that way.
perhaps my point, and what John is saying, wasn't clear. The voluntary dues structure does restrict the number of people who vote. However, there are plenty of people who can turn out and vote on the disposition of their dues, and did last June. That's what happened. Those people who paid in got to vote on how those dues were used. However, what we're also doing is, by going to a mandatory assessment, what we're doing is we're getting rid of that bifurcation. Every property owner will be a member. The dues
We
will
are a
go
member
to
right now.
zero, and therefore everybody will be a member and will be able to vote as long as they're not in arrears on their obligatory covenant fee or mandatory assessment. And John is my second.
Dennis had it. Dennis?
Truly, everybody who pays their company, everybody's a member, as Maria's saying, that's true. It only relates to covenant issues. If I understand. Maybe misunderstand.
Everybody is a member, period,
Okay,
based on
period.
your
Okay,
bylaws.
It's not, I'm not here to debate that. The question though is, Maria's point is well taken. If you open up and say everybody has a vote, then everybody has to be given that opportunity. And I don't believe it's realistic to think that we would get them to show up in this room. So one of the issues we as a board have to deal with, given this is a recommendation on where we're going, is that question. How do we deal with the voting process? So it is a valid point to be made.
John, you still have something?
Yeah, I'd like everybody who paid their dues for FY14 to stand up. Just to raise your hand. Those that didn't
Are never gonna stand up.
are never going to stand up, and they're not bellying up to their part of the
I
pie.
did not, because I do not approve of the way you are controlling the budget through your mandatory meetings that are, to me, illegal in terms of how you are going about answering their budget questions. That's my choice not to be a member. Up until a few years ago, I was always a member. This is my choice now because I do not approve of the way you're spending your money. Because I am a member of the Drum Point community.
Can we move on? Dan?
I wanted to point out that I was under the impression that this was a presentation of the planning committee about the financial projections. And for the last 10 or 15 minutes, we have been entirely off topic. I would appreciate it if we could try to stick to the agenda and keep to the proper order of business so that most of us here don't have our time wasted by one or two people who have some particular issue that they want to bring up that is out of the topic at present on the board.
Thank you, Dan.
Gary, I'm watching the clock, and as interesting and alive this conversation has been, I'm going to suggest you just take the
One
one
more
last
question.
point and then finish the agenda.
It's more of a statement than a question. I would definitely concur that I think there needs to be a mail-in type of voting process. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend on the 29th, not because I was uninterested and had vacation plans. So although a member, I'm sure there's a lot of people of that situation as well. So I would appreciate it if it would go out as more of a general consensus mail-in process. I think that's the fairest way.
Well taken.
I'm done. Cheers.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Move right along.
All right, I'm going on, is there, I'm not aware of any old business, so we didn't put any down in that placeholder. Does anyone have any old business before we go into new business? Okay, new business, nominating committee, and then security. So you're on for both of those, Peter.
The train just drove through there.
Have to do some multitasking. I guess we're being videotaped, so we have to stand where everybody can hear. The nominating committee. The nominating committee is out looking for members of the nominating committee. I have served on the nominating committee for several years, and sometimes it works out pretty well. And my suggestion is that we already have 2 volunteers, and that's very good. We like to have 3 to 5 every year. We like to reach out. To me, the most important part of running the community is having good board members. The most important thing about getting good board members is to go out and have people run and serve our community as volunteers and put in all the time and effort that these people put in. Gary puts in other volunteers to keep this community running as it is. And in my own view, the planning and the finance committee deserve a great deal of credit for having spent the many, many volunteer hours to put together their best thoughts to present to you this morning. It's unfortunate that so few people come to these meetings to give the input. But what we need is good members of our board. We all have that important interest for all our properties, our way of life here. And the nominating committee, although it's not heralded very often, has to do good work to get this done. And I'm going to submit a motion that in the future that we have a standing committee of nominating committee, that we don't wait until December to try to come up with a nominating committee to then come up with nominees to run. That this should be an ongoing annual procedure, so we can reach out to all the members of the community and get them to volunteer their time, which is a big task and a big asking of anybody to do that. So what I wanted to suggest is that for the June meeting, that we have some kind of adjustment to our bylaws, which would, one, make a standing committee for the nominating committee, because I think it's that important. And the second is that the non-chairman have a board member be part of the nominating committee. Most organizations, the leadership of those organizations participate in the nominating process. Our bylaws prevent us from having any of these people participate in any of the nominating process. Now, anybody at the June meeting can be nominated from the floor, so it doesn't exclude anybody. But I think the board and the community would be well served if we could have a standing input, not the chairperson, because we don't want to have any, images of dictatorial process here, or old boy networks repeating themselves, but as a member, so that we have a standing committee to do that. I can make that a motion, or we can put it on the agenda for June.
Please make that a motion, and
Not you, but.
are you making a motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion that we have 2 things, a standing committee, and that 1 member of the board of directors be included as that, as a member of the nominating committee.
Second motion.
Any discussion?
I have a concern about the way you made the motion.
All right.
I can see something of that import being announced in the newsletter to the community in advance for review, that is, that the change in the bylaws. I think if you would be willing to adjust your motion so that, to say that we want to address the question of a possible bylaws change, to put a member of the board on the nominating committee but not chair it, I think that's something we can vote on.
Okay, done.
And it's for June.
Yeah.
All right, now and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion?
Should that member be somebody who isn't going to be running on that particular election?
That would be correct. They'd have to be excluded. Jerry was once on the nominating committee, and he made the extra leap, and he recused himself from further discussions when he ran to be on the board. And that's proper. Good consideration.
Yes.
Would it be the same board member each year, or would that membership alternate?
I would expect that we
Alternate
can't-
by position on the board.
My off-the-cuff legal opinion is that we can't constrain the bylaws one way or the other. And so I think that would have to be discussed in some detail in June.
The chair appoints members of committees, so every year, the chair will appoint the person to serve on that committee. See what they have to meet, change every year. The same person, depending on the instruction of the board.
Well, I wasn't thinking about the person on the committee, I was thinking about the position on the committee. It would be on a
Position.
rotating basis.
Position is a member of the board serves on the committee. That
But
member
never
is
as chairman.
appointed by the chair each year. So,
But
the
not as
chair of the
chairman.
board.
No, not the chair.
Chair of the board appoints members of committees.
But if nobody running that particular year can be on that nominating committee, it would make a turnover in any case.
I think Dan has an important,
Well, I was just a little confused. I thought that the board voted for who were members of the committees, not that the chairman just arbitrarily appointed them.
That's correct.
yes.
Chair doesn't appoint.
May I just, I'm watching the clock, may I just point out that I think we're getting slightly off topic by now. I think your question is a valid one, and my off-the-cuff answer is it can be hashed out in June, but it's unlikely that the bylaws could be changed to say that the same member would be on, a year basis. So I think we can defer that till June. There are some other hands over here.
No, my question was answered.
Okay, are we ready for vote? In that case,
Let me read the motion.
I made the adjustment. I agreed to the adjustment. Should be under consideration, was it? Or under review? Yes.
excuse me,
Your recommendation to your amendment was?
was that,
Consider.
that in June, we will consider the possibility or the potential to change the bylaws to allow a board member to be on the nominating committee but not chair it.
And that we have a standing committee.
Correct.
Yes,
That's the motion.
yes.
Because I really feel
That-
this ought to be a year-round activity. and not just last
Why
week.
don't you do them separately?
What?
Have a standing committee voted on separately, or you don't need to vote on that?
These would all be part of the bylaws change, so that.
Is to conduct a vote at the June meeting.
Yes, Dan.
I'm confused again. Are we voting on a motion that in the future we're going to make a motion in order to consider these bylaws changes? This
Yes.
seems silly. Why do we not just say that this motion has been tabled and will be presented at the June meeting so that it can be authorized and we don't have to vote on anything?
We don't have to do it. Sometimes one makes superfluous motions. I think it's a good idea to have it on the record that we did vote because, among other things, the nominating committee is usually an afterthought, and we just want to make sure there's a placeholder, and it's done with all formalities for the chair.
You can do that by making a motion. You would have to make that motion to table.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to table this motion to be presented at the June meeting.
Second.
Why don't you just do a show of hands?
This is beyond my
Required.
Vote now.
Vote now. Vote now on the table. On the
Let's,
table.
do we need a valid vote for that?
Can we just do a show
The
of
hand
hands?
show.
Show of hands, I think, is
Who
sufficient.
is in favor of Dan's motion?
Table.
Carried.
Who's opposed? Well, it passed.
So it'll be on
Done.
the agenda for June.
This has gone beyond my understanding of Robert's rules. I think we still have a motion on the floor. Is that totally undone? Okay.
Dan, you
All
save
right,
some
now-
paper,
So trees will be grateful.
Save some time,
All right,
too.
so it's tabled, that motion is tabled for consideration in June.
Yeah, it's too bad because it might delay it further because in June we will then defer it till December, but, you know. it would-
Okay.
Security.
May I suggest that we go ahead and authorize Peter this time to run this as an experiment with
What is it?
the,
It's a bylaw change.
I don't think that's legal, but I don't think people on the board can be prohibited from talking to members of the nominating committee, if that's your concern. Okay, the next item is security.
Oh, okay, well, we're gonna talk about primarily the beach. Because this was raised as a major concern by Joe and people who live around the beach. And the beach is a community problem that I want to, was asked by the board to discuss. Several of us got our heads together and we came up with a preliminary view of the issues and possible solutions to the beach problems. But first, I want to just get a poll. How many have used, raise your hands, used the beach for recreational purposes this year? 1, 2, 3, 4. Recreational purposes. Okay, good. That's a good number. How many have used it to gain access to the Drum Point area beach?
You can raise your hands, I'm not going to
About one person here has used the Drum Point DPPOA beach to gain access legally, going through the little water line onto the Drum Point beach.
Maybe the question should be, how many kids do we have
No,
here?
One person. 2 people? Only 2 people? All right? Okay, that's very interesting. How many people here are members of the Drum Point Club? Wow, that's good, thank you. That's very helpful. Because these are really a common problem we have. So I prepared on November 11th a 3-page report that was submitted to the board as they requested our recommendations. And these are, I'll run through these really quickly because we have 5 minutes really. How to summarize 3 pages in 5 minutes, but I'll quickly do this. What are the activities that Joe and others are really concerned about? And those of you who use this for recreational purposes. Are they non-residents who are trespassing? Is it the underage alcohol of residents or non-residents? Is it partying, drugs, fires, litter, or vehicular parking? Are these the main problems? By controlling access, presumably this will take care of some of the problems. Are we talking about residents? Are we talking about DPPOA card holders, non-residents, people, pets? What is it we're trying to control, and during what hours, during what seasons? And then there's the concern of fear of retribution. We hear that all the time. I didn't want to turn people in because I was afraid they'd come punch my windows out or let the air out of my tires, et cetera, like this. So this is, some of the solutions are going to be based on the following factors. Where do the dangerous and illegal or objectionable activities take place? Do they actually take place on the DPPOA beach, or do they take place in the forested Drum Point area? Now, in the past, we've had problems in both areas. So I think it's probably a joint problem. Are the drugs and illegal and partying and various shenanigans that go on, do they take place on the Drum Point property owner's beach or on the Drum Point Club beach? I mean, I went down there and visited the place, and there is a beaten track that you could drive a truck through that goes from the DPPOA beach into the Drum Point property. So I would suggest that, in spite of the vote here today, that much of our problem is that this is simply an access point to get to an area of the Drum Point area, which is inaccessible, very difficult to get to from the other side.
Peter, maybe they're coming from the other way.
Nice point, thank you. Now, the other thing you should remember is car and vehicular control is very different problem than people control. Very different issues. Cars are easy to keep out in some sense. People are very different. We found that at the Drum Point Club. I remember the Drum Point Club. They come over the fence, they go around the fence, whatever, and everything. So I also wanted to address the issue, well, how many people in the whole community of our 1,000 lots actually use the beach? In other words, do we have a small, my guess, and by talking to others, is that only 5–10% of our entire community actually use that beach for recreational purposes. The high water mean legal federal law that you can get access to anything if it's under, that law we're not going to get around. If it's below mean water, anybody can come, you can drive a destroyer in there if you want. I remember, and I talked to Fran about this at one time, that the Drum Point Club at one time was considered a natural preserve area. And I found an old sign that gave a license permit number, making it legally a preserve, nature preserve. Therefore, you would probably supersede the federal law, which allows anybody access by beach, but that's a legal issue that I haven't researched further. And so, some of the problems can we consider? Can we deputize local retired sheriffs to help us police the area? And would Evans agree to that? There's the problem of how much of the community really wants to put the money into solving this problem when only 10% of the people use it. And what is working now and what doesn't work. I'll move along very quickly. Technically, there are many, many ways of solving this issue. You can put signs up, you can put gates up, you can put video cameras, you can put motion detectors that send alarms off. You can put a manual switch on a video camera that when somebody like Joe sees events going on there, he starts taping things. There are many, many approaches, this all coming with varying costs. So it's up to how much the community wants to support this. There's sliding gates, magnetic cards, keys. You go over to the marinas here, they have the same problem we do. You go to Spring Cove, you go to the Calvert Marina, how do they control public access and theft and things that shouldn't be going on over there? They do it by a combination of things. I've spoken to them and gotten their assessment of some of their ways. Well, there are various deterrents, and you go to various stages. You can't make it Fort Knox, but you can inhibit some of the issues. I'll move on. Our recommendations are that the hang tags doesn't work. The hang tag goes in the car. If you don't have a car, you don't wear a hang tag. So, you know, there's a problem. Are you trying to keep the car there? Even if you don't have a hang tag, we can't get rid of the cars because they're sitting there and you lock them in or what. So hang tags, if you want to get what's working, what isn't working, I don't think hang tags are working right now. The other thing you can do is you have to remember that you can reduce access by reducing access to the Drum Point Club area. Now, a lot of the illegal activities are going on in the woods where they can't be seen. So if you seal that fence off, that stops the people from doing illegal things in the woods at night, they have to do them in the open, which is the whole area of the Drum Point Beach.
I just want to note that some of those illegal things include fires, which have in the past gotten out of control.
And, yeah, oh no. And one thing I have to add to this factor is that the emergency vehicles, if they want to get access to either beach, have to get in there, and if they want it, and they need authority from different people to get into the DPPOA beach, and then to get access to that area of the Drum Point Club woods, they have to come through the DPPOA area. You can't get it, and we know that from previous fires. Now, I got 2 more minutes. So my recommendations are the following, and it's all going to depend on how much support we get from the community. So I must have more input from all the members of the community. Those that use it, we're going to have to pay for it, and those who don't use it.
And still have to pay for it.
Still have to pay. Now, one of the solutions that I've suggested to the paying problems are that we do the same system that both the Drum Point Club and the marinas use. You get a magnetic card or an access permit per individual. You pay $30 or $40 deposit, which you can get back. But that money is collected then, and it allows you to fund some of the security measures. So not only that, but that card would have to be reactivated once a year so you can keep control of it. Now, if somebody pays $30 or $40 for a card, they're going to pay attention to that card or that key, whichever thing you want to use, and you'll have to pay for things. Have 30 more seconds. It's all basically sum up. You can read my report, but it really boils down to how far does our community want to go. There are solutions. There's vehicular solutions, people solutions, fencing solutions. This has to be a joint effort. And I'm looking at Ralph, and I'm looking at Fran, and others. We're all members of the same problem. Because so many of us are members of the club too. It's almost a common beach in many ways. But I would like input. Please provide input to the board. We are just an ad hoc committee made up of myself, John, and Rourke Shallow, but I would like to get more input from people who actually use it. Is there monetary support to carry out some of these projects? Yes?
Peter, I had suggested that we use a key system, and if you go in as a member, you unlock it and then you lock it. Because if we leave it open, anybody driving around can pull it. But if you as a member, I said we pay $10 for a key, you get them at the office, and you unlock it when you go in, and you lock it when you're there, and then when you leave it, you lock it. So nobody can come in that isn't a member.
It is a private beach. I mean, people think of it as a public beach. It is not.
I need to at this point, bring this to a close.
Amy, excuse me, I'm sorry. But I can put your report on the website if you want me to do that, and then everybody can read it.
Yeah, I'd like to. Go ahead and put the report there.
All right. I just want to note that this is something that has been in about 3.5 seconds passed before the board in our deliberations, monthly deliberations. We still have work to do on it, and there will be funding consequences of some of these options, which will have to be built into some of the planning for how we're going to use our funds in the future. And finally, what you're saying about the beach is very complicated by the club, but it could also apply to things like the boat ramp parking. So I'm going to close this, and we do list a public comment period at the end. Now, I believe we had a lot of public comment on the fee structure And in terms of time, I'd like to ask you to simply confine your remarks, which should be brief, or questions, to things other than the fee structure, because you devoted a lot of time to that. Are there any public comments? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I got a question about the sign. Since we're going to, and I couldn't hear your discussion or your rulings we had going on here. Since we're going to have the sign redone, is it going to be refurbished the way it is now, or are we going to look at a new design? Could we look at a new
The
design?
board has approved going ahead with replacement of the sign to the extent feasible, and that could be refurbishing it, which will take a little doing because there is some visible damage in the wood, or replacing it with a replica.
But why do we need to look at a replica? Why can't we look at updating it and making it look more modern? Or is it something that goes to the committee?
We are looking at all options.
All options, okay. I think that should be looked at as, since, you know, it's going
All right,
to
well,
be.
the details have not been worked out, but I expect this will be addressed Tuesday night now that we have the funds. Yes, Peter.
Now, I'd just like to say something that we had, the passing of John Van Dyke, who has been a very important member of our emergency response group in Drum Point. He was one of our pillars, one of the 4 regional coordinators that we had for our club, and I just want to mention that John very unexpectedly passed about 10 days ago, and I'm very sorry about that. I'll also mention that Michelle Lee, the wife of Randy Lee, also passed recently. She was also a very strong supporter of the community.
And Lester Myers' wife.
Yeah, Eileen Myers
Lester
passed
was the
away.
founder of this, one of these areas.
Okay, I just wanted to mention it.
I hope this is the last one. I want to hear from you. Yes.
Has the board discussed replacing the sign on Cove Road?
The board, the DPPOA is a corporation, is not for profit. We do not take political positions. You're talking about the LNG?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm missing, I'm sorry. There's another sign.
The Eastern
Wait a
sign,
minute, let me hear.
the
There's another
Leeson Cove
sign.
entrance sign on Cove Road.
Leeson Cove.
We have it.
It's at
Not
Hilltop.
Leeson Cove
All right.
Drive, Cove Road.
I didn't want to take a lot of time. This will be fully discussed.
Right.
The
Cove Drive.
Beretta Boulevard sign will be refurbished or replaced. We are planning right now to replace the Leeson's Cove sign, probably by refurbishing an existing older sign. And it's been brought to the community's attention that there is another sign which
That simply needs a little adjustment with regard to having
the way it's
put back into
mounted.
place. So
So we're taking a look at more signs than that, and if you have any more comments, you should let Leah know.
Well, I want to know if the board is
Yes,
addressing
yes,
this.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, the board is working
Thank
on
you.
all of those things,
Thank you.
and to the extent that we know about them, which is
Yes.
3. Yes.
For the nominating committee, Peter mentioned that there were 3 members, but I didn't hear
3
any
to
names.
5. 3 to 5.
Well, you said there were existing 2 volunteers, and I assume that's in addition to yourself, but I didn't hear any names.
Don't make that assumption.
Well, so my question is, who are the individuals that the board has appointed to be members
They
of the
haven't been
They
nominating?
have
appointed.
not been brought to the
So we
board
currently
yet.
do not have anyone on the nominating.
That's correct. We have 2
Thank you.
volunteers.
Any more business before we adjourn? Yes.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.